The pen touched the divorce papers. That's when Emily saw something that made her blood run cold. Her husband's hand was resting on another woman's belly. His mistress was sitting right there in the courtroom, 6 months pregnant, and her mother-in-law was smiling at Emily like a predator
The results are
who had
definitive,
finally
Emily.
cornered its prey.
You're pregnant.
The room started spinning.
And you're much
Emily
further along
collapsed
than we
before she
thought.
could sign her name. But here's where this story
You
takes
thought
a
you
turn
could trap my
nobody
son,
expected.
didn't you, you little
When
liar?
Emily woke up in that hospital
Stay away
bed,
from him,
the
or
doctor
you'll
didn't
regret
just
it.
tell her she fainted from stress. The doctor told her she was pregnant too, 7 weeks along, with her cheating husband's baby. Now Emily had nothing. No home, no money, no job. Her own mother blamed her for the divorce. In the Mitchell family, they weren't just trying to leave her with nothing. They were coming for her unborn child. What happens next will shock you, because Emily Carter didn't just survive. She burned their entire empire to the ground. This is a story about betrayal, revenge, and a woman who lost everything only to discover she had the power all along. Stay with me until the end. Trust me, you are not ready for these twists. The Manhattan family court building loomed before Emily Carter like a monument to everything that had gone wrong in her life. The gray stone walls seemed to absorb the weak February sunlight, matching the cold emptiness she felt inside. She pulled her charcoal wool coat tighter around her body, though the chill she felt had nothing to do with the weather. Today was the day. Today she would sign away 6 years of marriage to Ryan Mitchell, the man she once believed was her soulmate. Emily walked through the heavy doors, her heels clicking against the marble floors, with an authority that masked the turmoil raging inside her. She had been a kindergarten teacher once, before Ryan's company took off and he convinced her to quit, to focus on them, to let him take care of her. Now she was 32 years old with no job, no recent work history, and a prenuptial agreement that gave her almost nothing. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt eternal. When the doors finally opened, Emily's heart stopped. Ryan stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the city skyline. At 38, he was more handsome than the day she married him. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his custom navy suit fitting his athletic frame flawlessly. He was the picture of success, power, and control. But he was not alone. A beautiful younger woman sat in the gallery behind him, her hand resting on a visible baby bump. She looked to be about 6 months pregnant, and sitting beside her, arm wrapped protectively around the woman's shoulders, was Margaret Mitchell, Ryan's mother. Emily froze. Her blood turned to ice in her veins. The divorce papers had cited irreconcilable differences. Ryan never mentioned another woman. He never mentioned a baby. Margaret spotted Emily and smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered its prey. She leaned over and whispered something to the pregnant woman. Both of them laughed. Emily's lawyer, a nervous junior associate named Kevin, shuffled papers beside her. He would not meet her eyes. She had started with a different attorney, a shark named Rebecca Torres, who had promised to fight for her. But somehow, 2 weeks ago, Rebecca had suddenly taken a position at a different firm, the firm that represented Ryan's company. Emily understood now. Ryan had bought her lawyer, left her with this boy who looked barely old enough to shave. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Patricia Callahan, called them forward. Emily moved as if through water, her legs heavy, her mind racing. The judge began reading the divorce terms. That was when Emily learned the full scope of Ryan's betrayal. He had filed for divorce 3 months ago, claiming she abandoned the marriage. He was requesting she vacate the penthouse within 30 days. The prenuptial agreement she had signed at 25, when she trusted him completely, gave her almost nothing. And Ryan's attorney had submitted evidence that Emily was emotionally unstable and neglectful. Evidence she had never seen, accusations she had never heard. Emily tried to stand, tried to object, but her voice would not come. The room tilted. She saw the pregnant woman's smug smile, Ryan's cold gray eyes, Margaret's satisfied expression. The pen was in her hand, the divorce papers were before her. She began forming the first letter of her name. That was when the room started to spin. The black ink seemed to blur and swirl on the white page. She heard a distant ringing in her ears, felt her stomach lurch violently. The pen fell from her fingers. Emily, Ryan's voice sounded far away, alarm cutting through his usual control. She tried to respond, to say she was fine, but her tongue felt thick and useless. The room tilted sideways. She saw Ryan's face closer now, those gray eyes wide with something that might have been panic. His hands reached for her. She felt herself falling into darkness. The last thing Emily heard before the blackness swallowed her was a woman's laughter. Margaret's laughter. And then nothing at all. She woke to the rhythmic beeping of machines and the sharp smell of antiseptic. Hospital. The realization came slowly, her mind foggy and confused. She blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights, trying to remember what happened. The divorce papers, the judge's office, the pregnant woman, falling. Emily tried to sit up, but her head throbbed viciously. A nurse appeared almost immediately, a kind-faced woman with graying hair and gentle hands. "Easy now," the nurse said. "You took quite a fall. Hit your head on the table going down. You have been out for about 2 hours." 2 hours. Emily looked around the room. It was empty except for her and the nurse. No husband rushing to her side. No concerned family member holding her hand. "Where is my husband?" Emily asked, though she was not sure why she bothered. He was not her husband anymore. Or he would not be once those papers were signed. The nurse's expression flickered with something like pity. "Your family is in the waiting room. They asked not to be disturbed." They asked not to be disturbed. Of course they did. The door opened and a woman in a white coat entered. She was in her 50s, with warm brown skin and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. Her name tag read Dr. Patricia Williams, Obstetrics and Gynecology. Emily's confusion deepened. Why would they send an OB/GYN for a fainting spell? "Mrs. Mitchell," Dr. Williams began, then paused, checking her chart. "Or should I say, Miss Carter?" "Emily is fine," she said quietly. "What happened to me? Why am I talking to an obstetrician, doctor?" Williams pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. Her expression was gentle but serious. "Emily, you fainted due to a combination of stress, low blood pressure, and hormonal changes, all of which are completely normal given your condition." "My condition?" Emily's heart started to race. "What condition?" Dr. Williams smiled warmly. "You are pregnant, Emily. About 7 weeks along based on your hormone levels. Congratulations." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. Pregnant, that was impossible. She and Ryan had not been together in months. They had separated 3 months ago. 7 weeks would mean it happened right before he moved out. During that one terrible, desperate night when grief and anger and longing had collided into a passion that felt both like a goodbye and a plea for him to stay. The next morning, he had packed his things and left anyway. He had served her with divorce papers before lunch. She thought she had been careful. She thought one night could not possibly change everything. Emily looked at the doctor, her mouth opening and closing, but no words coming out. Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, still flat, but now holding a secret that changed everything. "That is not possible," she finally whispered. "The timing, it does not..." Dr. Williams nodded with understanding. "The timing may be surprising, but I assure you the test results are accurate. We confirmed it with blood work. Your hormone levels are exactly where they should be for 7 weeks." Emily's mind raced backward through the past 2 months. She had been tired lately, but she attributed that to the stress of the divorce. She had felt nauseous a few times in the morning. But again, stress seemed like the obvious culprit. She had been so focused on surviving each day, on holding herself together, that she had ignored what her body was trying to tell her. "I thought it was stress," Emily whispered. "That is very common, Dr. Thun." Williams assured her. "Many women do not realize they are pregnant for several weeks, especially during major life changes. But I want you to know that both you and the baby appear to be healthy. The fainting was your body's way of demanding you slow down and take care of yourself." A baby, Ryan's baby, growing inside her right now at this very moment. While she lay in a hospital bed, divorce papers unsigned, another woman carrying his child sitting in that courtroom. Emily felt the walls closing in. What am I going to do? The question was not meant for the doctor. It was barely meant to be spoken aloud. But Dr. Williams heard it anyway. Right now, Dr. Williams said gently, "You do not have to decide anything. You rest. You recover." And when you are ready, you figure out what comes next. But Emily, I want you to know something important. Whatever you decide, you have options. You are not alone in this. But Emily had never felt more alone in her entire life. Ryan finally appeared in Emily's hospital room 45 minutes after she woke up. He walked in without knocking, his expression a carefully constructed mask of concern. But Emily knew him well enough to see through it. He was not here because he cared. He was here because his lawyer had probably advised him to look sympathetic. Emily, I heard you collapsed. Are you okay? His tone was flat, rehearsed. She noticed he was checking his phone even as he spoke to her. Emily studied the man she had married, the man she had loved, the man who had slowly, methodically erased her from her own life until she had nothing left but him. And then he had discarded her anyway. I am pregnant, Ryan. The words came out before she could stop them, before she could think about strategy or timing or protection. She just needed him to know, needed to see his face when he understood what he was walking away from. Ryan's expression cycled through several emotions. Shock first, his mouth opening slightly, then calculation, his eyes narrowing as he processed the implications. And finally, cold resolve, his jaw setting in that way she knew too well. That is unfortunate timing, he said. His voice was steady now, businesslike. Look, Emily, I will increase the settlement. We can be reasonable about this. Get the procedure done. Move on with your life. We can both start fresh. Emily stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the monster she had married. Not once had he asked if the baby was his. Not once had he considered that maybe, just maybe, this changed things. Get out, she said quietly. Emily, be reasonable. This does not have to be complicated. I'm offering you a way forward. Get out. Ryan sighed, the sound of a man dealing with an unreasonable child. Fine, I will have my lawyer contact yours. But think about what I said. This is the best option for everyone. He left without looking back. Emily had exactly 3 minutes of silence before the door opened again. This time it was Margaret Mitchell who swept into the room, a designer handbag on her arm and a smile on her face that made Emily's blood run cold. Margaret was 65 years old and looked a decade younger thanks to excellent doctors and an iron will. She had silver hair perfectly styled, pearls at her throat, and the bearing of a woman who had never been told no in her entire life. She had hated Emily from the moment Ryan brought her home. A kindergarten teacher was not good enough for her son. A woman without family money or social connections was not worthy of the Mitchell name. I heard the news, Margaret said, settling into the chair Dr. Williams had vacated. How convenient. You suddenly discover you are pregnant right when the divorce is being finalized. Did you think this little trap would work? Emily said nothing. There was nothing to say to this woman. Margaret leaned forward, her eyes glittering with malice. My son has already given me a grandchild. A real grandchild. Jessica is 6 months along with a boy. The Mitchell heir. Whatever you are carrying is irrelevant. Jessica. So that was the name of the pregnant woman in the courtroom. Emily filed this information away, though she was not sure why it mattered. I know you have nothing, Emily. Margaret's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, as if she were sharing a secret between friends. No job, no savings, no family money. You gave up everything for my son, and now you have exactly what you deserve, nothing. Emily felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. She would not give this woman the satisfaction. Margaret continued, relentless. If you try to claim this baby as Ryan's, we will drag you through court until you are broke and broken. We will call you an unfit mother. We will take everything, including that baby if we have to. She paused, letting the threat sink in. Or, Margaret said, her tone shifting to something almost pleasant, you can sign the papers, take the settlement, and disappear or start over somewhere else. Forget you ever knew my son. Your choice. Emily found her voice at last. Get out of my room. Margaret smiled. Think about it, dear. You have 72 hours before we finalize the divorce proceedings. Make the smart choice. She rose gracefully, smoothing her skirt as if they had been discussing nothing more serious than the weather. Oh, and Emily? Margaret paused at the door. That penthouse you have been living in? The locks were changed this morning. Your belongings are boxed up in the lobby. Security has been instructed not to let you up. She left, closing the door softly behind her. Emily sat in the hospital bed, stunned beyond tears. In the space of a few hours, she had lost her husband, her home, and any illusion that she might walk away from this marriage with her dignity intact. She was pregnant, homeless, penniless, and completely alone. Her phone buzzed. A text from the building management company confirming what Margaret had said. Her access had been revoked. Her belongings would be held in storage for 30 days, after which they would be disposed of. Emily finally let herself cry. 2 hours later, after Dr. Williams had discharged her with instructions to rest, eat well, and find an obstetrician, Emily stood on the sidewalk outside her former building. Margaret had not lied. Her boxes were stacked in the service entrance, watched over by a bored security guard who would not meet her eyes. Everything she owned in the world, reduced to a dozen cardboard boxes that she had no way to transport and nowhere to take. She tried to access the joint bank account from her phone. Frozen. Ryan had transferred everything to a private account 2 months ago. Her credit cards, which were all connected to his accounts, had been canceled. Emily sat down on a bench, her legs unable to hold her up anymore. The February cold seeped through her coat, but she barely felt it. The numbness inside was worse. She had one option left, one person she could call, though the thought of it made her sick. Emily dialed her mother's number. Her mother answered on the third ring. "Emily, I was not expecting to hear from you. Is the divorce finished?" Emily explained everything. The fainting, the pregnancy, the locks being changed, being left with nothing. Through it all, her mother was silent. When Emily finished, the silence stretched for so long she thought the call had dropped. "Mom, are you there?" Her mother sighed heavily. "Emily, you should have tried harder to keep him happy. Men stray when wives let themselves go. Maybe if you had given him a child sooner, things would be different." Emily felt something crack inside her chest. "Mom, I am pregnant. Right now, I need help. Come home if you must, but do not expect me to support your poor choices. You made your bed, Emily. Now you have to lie in it." The call ended. Emily sat on that bench, watching people walk by, living their normal lives while hers crumbled around her. She was 32 years old, pregnant, homeless, and her own mother had just blamed her for her husband's affair. She did not know how long she sat there before her phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed her brother's name, Luke Harrison. "Diana called me. She told me what happened. Where are you? I am coming to get you right now. Do not move." "Luke, I cannot ask you to get involved in this mess. You are not asking. I am telling. You are my sister, and you are in trouble, and that is the end of the discussion. Now give me your location." 30 minutes later, an old Ford pickup truck pulled up to the curb. Luke jumped out before the engine fully stopped, crossing the sidewalk in 3 long strides to pull Emily into a bone-crushing hug. Luke Harrison was 40 years old, 6'2", and built like the firefighter he was. He had their father's sandy hair and their mother's stubborn chin, and right now his face was set in an expression of barely contained fury. "I am going to kill him," Luke said into Emily's hair. "I am going to find Ryan Mitchell, and I am going to kill him." Despite everything, Emily laughed. A wet, broken sound, but a laugh nonetheless. "You cannot kill him. You would go to prison. Might be worth it." Luke pulled back to look at her face, his expression softening. "You are staying with me and Lily, no arguments. I know the apartment is small, and I burn dinner every night, and Lily is going through a phase where she only communicates in TikTok dances. But we have got a couch with your name on it, and you are family." Emily felt fresh tears streaming down her face, but these were different tears. Relief maybe, or gratitude, or just the overwhelming realization that she was not quite as alone as she thought. "Thank you," she whispered. "Do not thank me yet. Wait until you taste my cooking." Luke's apartment was small, cluttered, and filled with the chaos of single parenthood. Toys scattered across the floor, dishes in the sink, a fire extinguisher mounted prominently next to the stove. But it was warm, and it was safe, and Emily had never been more grateful for anything in her life. Lily Harrison was 8 years old, with her father's sandy hair and a personality approximately 6 times larger than her small body. When Emily walked through the door that first night, Lily greeted her with an elaborate dance routine that seemed to involve a lot of arm waving and hip movements. "Dad said you are having a baby, and your husband is a bad word." "I cannot say," Lily announced when she finished. "Can I be the baby's aunt? I am very responsible. I only killed my goldfish a little bit. Emily smiled for the first time in what felt like years. I would love that. Lily beamed. Good. Also, Dad's cooking is terrible, so you should probably learn to order pizza. I already know all the delivery numbers. Luke appeared from the kitchen, holding a pan that was actively smoking. Dinner is served. I made pasta. Lily leaned close to Emily and whispered loudly, It is burnt. It is always burnt. Over the following 2 months, Emily slowly began to piece her life back together. She could not afford a lawyer to fight Ryan's legal team, but Diana Santos helped her navigate the system anyway. Diana was Emily's best friend from college and also one of the best divorce attorneys in the city. She could not officially represent Emily because her firm had a conflict of interest, but she could advise her, guide her, point her in the right direction, document everything, Diana told her during one of their secret coffee meetings. Screenshots, emails, bank statements. Get copies of anything you can before Ryan's lawyers lock it all down. The moment you suspect something is wrong, start building your evidence file. By the time most women come to me, it is already too late to gather what they need. Emily took this advice to heart. She started keeping meticulous records. Every communication from Ryan's lawyers, every denied request, every piece of mail that came to Luke's apartment instead of her former home. She found a part-time job at a daycare center in Brooklyn, using her teaching background to work with toddlers. The pay was terrible, but it was something, enough to buy groceries and contribute to the household. She found a community clinic that offered prenatal care on a sliding scale based on income. Dr. Williams had given her a referral, and the staff there treated her with kindness even though she could barely afford the reduced fees. By the end of March, Emily had established something resembling a routine. She was 12 weeks pregnant, starting to show just slightly, and beginning to believe that maybe she could do this. Maybe she could survive. Then Diana called with news that changed everything. I found something. Diana's voice was tight with excitement. Ryan's company is being investigated for tax irregularities, and you are not going to believe what the forensic accountant discovered. Emily gripped the phone tighter. What? Hidden accounts. Multiple offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, and there is one account with your name on it that you never knew existed. It has $200,000 in it. Emily's legs gave out. She sat down hard on Luke's couch. That is not possible. I would have known about an account in my name. That is the point. Ryan hid it. He was sheltering money from the IRS and from you. If this comes out in the divorce proceedings, your prenup could be voided. Fraud is one of the few things that breaks a prenuptial agreement. Emily's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. What do I need to do? There is a preliminary hearing in 2 weeks. If you testify about not knowing about this account, Ryan is looking at serious legal trouble. Tax fraud, hidden assets in a divorce. The judge is going to be very unhappy. Diana paused, and Emily could hear the caution in her voice. But Em, you need to understand what this means. If you testify, you are declaring war. Ryan and Margaret are not going to take this lying down. Are you ready for that? Emily thought about the past 3 months, the humiliation, the cruelty, being thrown out of her home while pregnant, being blamed by her own mother, being reduced to sleeping on her brother's couch while Ryan lived in a penthouse with his pregnant mistress. I am ready. The preliminary hearing was held on a Tuesday morning in early April. Emily walked into the courthouse wearing the most professional outfit she owned, a simple navy dress that Diana had helped her pick out. Her baby bump was visible now, a gentle curve that she found herself touching whenever she felt nervous. Ryan was already there, flanked by his legal team. He looked surprised to see her, and even more surprised when she took the witness stand. Emily testified clearly and calmly. She explained that she had never known about the offshore accounts. She provided documentation showing that Ryan had controlled all their finances during the marriage. She answered every question the judge asked with quiet dignity. Ryan's lawyer tried to rattle her, suggesting that she must have known, that she was playing dumb to gain sympathy. But Emily stood her ground. I trusted my husband, she said, looking directly at Ryan for the first time. He told me he was taking care of our finances. I believed him. That was my mistake. The judge ruled in Emily's favor. The prenuptial agreement was voided due to fraudulent asset concealment. Emily was entitled to 40% of the marital assets, including the hidden offshore money. Ryan was ordered to pay retroactive spousal support and all of Emily's legal fees. Emily walked out of that courthouse feeling like she could finally breathe. Diana met her on the steps, grinning widely. You did it. You actually did it. We did it. I could not have done any of this without you. That night, Luke made his famous burnt pasta in celebration. Lily did a victory dance that she had apparently been practicing for days. For the first time since that terrible morning in the courthouse, Emily felt hope. It lasted exactly 6 hours. At 11 o'clock that night, there was a knock on Luke's door. He answered it to find two people in professional attire holding clipboards. Mr. Harrison, we are from Child Protective Services. We have received a report of child endangerment regarding your daughter Lily. We need to inspect the home and interview the minor. Luke's face went white. What? That is insane. Who filed this report? The report was anonymous, sir, but we are required to investigate. May we come in? Emily watched in horror as CPS investigators walked through Luke's small apartment, taking notes on everything. The cramped space, the toys on the floor, the smoke stains near the kitchen stove. They interviewed Lily in her bedroom while Emily and Luke waited in the living room. This is them, Luke said, his voice shaking with rage. Ryan and his mother, they are retaliating because you won in court. Emily felt sick. She had known they would fight back, but she never imagined they would go after Luke, after Lily. Diana called the next morning with confirmation. The CPS report was filed by Margaret Mitchell's assistant. The evidence was fabricated. Photos of Lily at a playground, twisted to look like neglect. Testimony from a concerned neighbor who did not actually exist, but the damage was already done. Ryan's lawyers used the CPS investigation to appeal the divorce ruling. They claimed that Emily was unstable, that she associated with unfit family members, that her judgment was compromised. They filed a motion to establish paternity and seek full custody of Emily's unborn baby. And they froze the settlement until the appeal could be resolved. In one night, Emily lost everything she had won, and now they were coming for her baby. The CPS investigation took 6 weeks to resolve. 6 weeks of interviews and inspections and social workers asking Lily questions designed to trip her up. In the end, Luke was cleared of all wrongdoing. The report was determined to be unfounded, but the investigation had other consequences. Luke's ex-wife, a woman named Melissa who had abandoned him and Lily 3 years ago, suddenly reappeared. She claimed the CPS case proved Luke was unfit, and she wanted to revisit the custody arrangement. Luke was now fighting for his own daughter, all because he had helped Emily. This is not your fault, Luke said one evening when Emily could not stop apologizing. I would do it again in a heartbeat, but maybe you should stay somewhere else just until this blows over. For Lily's sake, if Melissa's lawyers find out you are still here, they will use it against me. Emily understood. She hated it, but she understood. At 5 months pregnant, Emily checked into a women's shelter in Queens. It was called Safe Haven, a converted church that provided temporary housing for women escaping difficult situations. The rooms were dormitory style, 4 beds to a room, with communal bathrooms and a shared kitchen. It was humbling. It was also eye-opening. Emily had never thought of herself as someone who would end up in a shelter. She had a college degree. She had been married to a millionaire. She had lived in a penthouse with a view of Central Park. But here she was, sleeping on a narrow cot with everything she owned in a single suitcase under her bed. The women she met at Safe Haven came from every background imaginable. There was Rosa Martinez, a 45-year-old woman who had left her abusive husband after 20 years and was now working 2 jobs to save for her own apartment. There was Keisha Robinson, 29, a mother of 2 who had escaped a violent relationship and was trying to rebuild her life from scratch. They were survivors, all of them. And slowly Emily began to see herself as one too. Girl, Rosa said one evening when Emily told her the abbreviated version of her story, you are telling me you had a penthouse with a view and you left? I did not leave, Emily clarified. I was thrown out. While pregnant, Rosa nodded sagely. Men are trash, no offense to your baby daddy. Full offense, Emily replied. He deserves it. Rosa laughed, a big warm sound that made Emily smile despite everything. I like you. You have got fire in you. I can tell. The fire felt pretty dim most days. But Emily was trying. She had lost her job at the daycare. Someone, and she had no doubt who, had sent anonymous information about her situation to her employer. The pending custody case, the CPS investigation, the fact that she was living in a shelter. Her manager had called her in and explained, apologetically, that they could not have that kind of instability around children. Emily understood the logic even as it devastated her. She was being punished for circumstances beyond her control. But the world did not care about fairness. The world only cared about appearances. Now she spent her days at the shelter, helping in the kitchen, doing odd jobs for small amounts of cash, and trying to figure out her next move. The court date for the custody appeal was approaching, and Diana was working pro bono to prepare her case. But the odds were not in Emily's favor. Ryan had money, Ryan had lawyers, Ryan had his mother, who seemed willing to do anything to destroy Emily completely. All Emily had was a growing belly and a stubborn refusal to give up. At her prenatal appointment that week, Dr. Williams looked concerned when she took Emily's blood pressure. "It is too high," the doctor said. "Emily, the stress you are under is affecting the baby. I need you on bed rest. I live in a shelter," Emily replied flatly. "Bed rest is not really an option." Dr. Williams sighed. "I understand, but I need you to hear me clearly. If your blood pressure continues to rise, you are at risk for preterm labor. You could develop preeclampsia, which is dangerous for both you and the baby. You need to find a way to reduce your stress, or I am going to have to hospitalize you." Emily nodded, but they both knew it was an impossible request. She could not reduce her stress when her entire life was under attack. That night, lying in her narrow cot at the shelter, Emily felt the baby kick for the first time. It was a small movement, barely perceptible, like the flutter of butterfly wings against her insides. But it was real. Her baby was real. This tiny life growing inside her, completely dependent on Emily to protect it. She started to cry. Rosa's voice came from the cot beside her. "Hey, are you okay?" "I felt the baby kick," Emily whispered. "And I just realized how badly I am failing her. I have nothing to give her. No home, no guau, no money. Her father is trying to take her away from me before she is even born. What kind of mother brings a child into this?" Rosa was quiet for a moment. Then she got up and crossed to Emily's cot, sitting on the edge with a creak of springs. "Let me tell you something my grandmother used to say. When the devil keeps coming for you, it is because you have got something he wants. Your baby is worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for, and crying in a shelter bed is not giving up. It is being human. You rest tonight. Tomorrow we go to war." Emily looked at this woman she had known for only a few weeks, this stranger who had become a friend, and felt something shift inside her. Maybe she was not as alone as she thought. Maybe there were people worth trusting after all. "Tomorrow," Emily agreed. "Tomorrow we go to war." A week after her conversation with Rosa, Emily received a package at the shelter. The return address was blank. Her name was printed on a plain white label. Inside, she found 3 items: a burner phone still in its packaging, a USB drive, and a handwritten, "Yeah, everything you need, use it wisely, a friend." Emily stared at the package for a long time, her mind racing through possibilities. Who knew she was at the shelter? Who would send her evidence? And evidence of what? She called Diana immediately. "Do not plug that USB into anything connected to the internet," Diana warned. "It could be a trap. Ryan's lawyers could be trying to set you up. Bring it to me. I know someone who can check it safely." Diana's someone turned out to be a forensic IT specialist named Marcus, who worked out of a cramped office in Brooklyn. He examined the USB drive in a secure environment, scanning it for viruses or tracking software. "It is clean," he announced after an hour of analysis. "And you are not going to believe what is on here." The contents of the USB drive were explosive. Audio recordings of Ryan and Margaret discussing how to destroy Emily. "We need to break her," Margaret's voice said clearly. "Make her too tired to fight. By the time this baby is born, she should have nothing left." Evidence that Jessica Vale, Ryan's mistress, had known about Emily from the beginning. She had actively helped Ryan sabotage the marriage, encouraging him to work longer hours, suggesting ways to isolate Emily from her friends. Financial records showing that Ryan had been hiding money offshore for years, far more than the $200,000 they had discovered. The total was closer to $4 million. And most devastating of all, medical records showing that Jessica's pregnancy had complications. Serious ones. And Ryan had been pressuring her to keep this information from his family, apparently afraid it would make her less valuable as the producer of his heir. This is incredible, Diana breathed. This changes everything. But we need to be careful. Some of this was clearly obtained illegally. We cannot use it directly in court. Emily nodded, understanding. But we can use it to know where to look. Exactly. We subpoena the right records, depose the right people, and suddenly this information comes out through legitimate channels. Whoever sent you this just gave us a roadmap. The question remained, who had sent it? Emily had a theory, but it seemed impossible. The only person with access to all of this information would have to be someone inside Ryan's inner circle, someone who had turned against him. Diana spent the next 2 months working Emily's case like it was the most important thing in her life, which for Emily, it was. They filed motion after motion, forcing Ryan's legal team to respond to discovery requests and document demands. Slowly, piece by piece, the evidence from the USB drive was verified through official channels, the offshore accounts, the recorded conversations, the conspiracy to file false CPS reports. Ryan's lawyers fought back hard. They tried to have the case sealed. They filed complaints against Diana's conduct. They requested delays and continuances at every opportunity, but the truth was coming out, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The custody hearing was scheduled for August, when Emily would be 7 months pregnant. It would be the moment of truth. Either she would walk away with her baby's future secured, or Ryan and Margaret would take everything. Emily prepared herself for war. She moved back in with Luke, whose custody situation with Melissa had finally been resolved in his favor. The CPS investigation had been so thoroughly debunked that Melissa's lawyer had advised her to drop the case. "I told you," Luke said when Emily tried to apologize again. "Family sticks together. Now stop saying sorry and help me figure out how to cook something that is not burnt." They settled on ordering pizza instead. The night before the custody hearing, Emily could not sleep. She sat in Luke's living room, one hand on her belly, feeling her daughter move inside her. Diana had prepared her testimony. She knew what to say, how to present herself, what questions to expect. But nothing could fully prepare her for facing Ryan again, for seeing the man who had tried to destroy her, and knowing that she was about to destroy him instead. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You are going to win tomorrow, but it will not be over. Be ready for what comes next. A friend." Emily stared at the message for a long time. Her mysterious ally was still watching, still helping from the shadows. But who were they? And what did they mean by what comes next? She would find out soon enough. The custody hearing took place in the same courthouse where Emily had fainted all those months ago. She walked through the doors with her head high, her posture straight, and her baby bump prominently visible beneath a professional Navy maternity dress. Diana walked beside her, carrying a briefcase full of evidence. Ryan was already there, flanked by 3 lawyers and a public relations consultant. Margaret sat behind him in the gallery, looking older somehow, more brittle. Jessica was notably absent. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Emily testified about her marriage, about how Ryan had gradually isolated her from friends and family, how he had controlled all the finances, leaving her completely dependent, how he had conducted a 2-year affair while lying to her face, how he and his mother had orchestrated a campaign of harassment designed to break her. She was calm, she was articulate, she was devastating. Diana presented the evidence. Financial records proving years of hidden assets, recorded phone calls between Ryan and Margaret discussing how to destroy Emily, testimony from Ryan's former assistant confirming that the CPS report had been fabricated. By the end, even the judge looked disgusted. "Mr. Mitchell," Judge Callahan said, her voice cold as ice, "in my 20 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such calculated cruelty toward a spouse. Your behavior has been reprehensible." The ruling was everything Emily had hoped for. Full custody to her. Ryan would get supervised visitation only if he completed parenting classes and psychological evaluation. Emily would receive 60% of the marital assets, including all hidden offshore funds. Child support payments would begin immediately, and a restraining order was issued against Margaret Mitchell, prohibiting her from contacting Emily or coming within 500 feet of her. Emily had won. She walked out of that courthouse into the August sunshine, surrounded by Luke and Diana and Rosa, who had taken the day off work to be there. They cheered. They hugged. For one perfect moment, Emily allowed herself to believe that the nightmare was finally over. It lasted until that evening. Emily was at Luke's apartment, relaxing for the first time in months, when the cramping started. At first, she thought it was just stress, her body finally releasing the tension it had been holding, but then the cramps got worse and closer together. "Luke," Emily gasped, doubling over. "Something is wrong." The ambulance ride was a blur. Emily remembers bright lights and urgent voices, rishas, and her own hand gripping Luke so tightly she thought she might break his fingers. She remembers the fear, cold and absolute, that she was about to lose everything she had fought so hard to protect. At the hospital, Dr. Williams met them at the emergency entrance, her face grave. "Emily, you are in preterm labor. The stress has been too much for your body. We are doing everything we can to stop the contractions, but I need you to prepare yourself. If the baby comes now at 32 weeks, there will be complications." "Can you stop it?" Emily begged. "Please. She has to be okay, doctor." Williams squeezed her hand. "We are going to try." They tried for 6 hours, every intervention, every medication. Dr. Williams and her team worked through the night while Emily prayed to a God she was not sure she believed in, making promises she was not sure she could keep. But some things could not be stopped. At 4 in the morning, Emily's water broke. The baby was coming whether they were ready or not. The delivery was fast and terrifying. Emily pushed when they told her to push and screamed when the pain became too much. She heard monitors beeping frantically and doctors shouting orders. And through it all, she kept her eyes fixed on Dr. Williams, anchoring herself to the one face she trusted. And then suddenly there was crying, a tiny, furious cry that was the most beautiful sound Emily had ever heard. "It is a girl," Dr. Williams announced, and despite the chaos, she was smiling. "A small girl, but she is breathing on her own. Emily, you have a daughter." They placed her on Emily's chest for exactly 30 seconds before whisking her away to the NICU. But in those 30 seconds, Emily memorized every movement, the impossibly small fingers, the scrunched up face, the dark wisps of hair. Her daughter, her Hope, Hope Grace Carter. Because hope was all Emily had left, and somehow, impossibly, hope had been enough. The next few days were a blur of exhaustion and fear. Hope was in the NICU, connected to monitors and tubes, fighting to grow stronger. Emily spent every moment she could at her daughter's incubator, talking to her, singing to her, promising her that everything would be okay. And then Ryan's lawyer arrived with new papers. "Mr. Mitchell is contesting the custody ruling," the lawyer announced, her voice flat and professional. "He is claiming that the premature birth proves Ms. Carter is an unfit mother who cannot provide a stable environment for a child. He is requesting emergency custody transfer once the baby is medically cleared." Emily stared at the papers in her hand. Her daughter was fighting for her life in the NICU, and Ryan was trying to take her away. Something inside Emily shattered. Rosa found her in the hospital chapel an hour later, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. "They will not stop," Emily gasped. "No matter what I do, they will not stop. I thought I won. I thought it was finally over. But they are never going to let me be free." Rosa sat down beside her and did not say anything for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "You remember what I told you at the shelter? When the devil keeps coming, it is because you have got something he wants. Your baby is worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for. And I know you are tired. I know you are broken. But you are not done. You rest today. Tomorrow we figure out how to end this for good." Emily looked at this woman who had become her sister in every way that mattered. "How?" Rosa smiled. "I think it is time you met your mysterious friend." Diana received a message 3 days after Hope was born. It was from the same anonymous source who had sent the USB drive. A request for a meeting, an address in Midtown, and a promise that this meeting would change everything. Diana went alone despite Emily's protests. If this was a trap, she did not want Emily anywhere near it. The meeting location was a coffee shop, upscale but not ostentatious. Diana arrived early and chose a seat with a clear view of the entrance. She ordered a coffee she did not intend to drink and waited. The woman who walked in 10 minutes later made Diana choke on her untouched coffee. It was Jessica Vale, Ryan's mistress, the mother of his son, the woman who had been sitting in the courthouse gallery, hand on her belly, laughing at Emily's humiliation. "Before you say anything," Jessica said, sliding into the seat across from Diana, "I know what you think of me. I deserve it, but I need you to hear me out." Diana forced herself to remain calm. "You have exactly 5 minutes." Jessica's story came out in a rush. She had been 22 when she started working at Ryan's company. Young, naive, dazzled by the attention of a wealthy, powerful man. He had pursued her. He had told her his marriage was over, that he and Emily were separated, that the divorce was just a formality. "By the time I realized he was lying," Jessica said, her voice trembling, "I was pregnant and trapped. Margaret made it very clear what would happen if I tried to leave. She would destroy me the same way she was destroying Emily. I would lose everything, including my son." "So you helped them," Diana said flatly. "You helped destroy an innocent woman." "Yes," Jessica met Diana's eyes directly. "I helped them because I was scared, because I was selfish, because I told myself Emily must have done something to deserve it. But I was wrong. And now I am watching Ryan do to me exactly what he did to her." "What do you mean? He is never home. He barely looks at our son. Margaret treats me like a brood mare, not a daughter-in-law. And last month I overheard Ryan and Margaret discussing how they would handle me once I was no longer useful. The exact same words they used about Emily." Jessica leaned forward, her expression desperate. "I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I have information. Information that could end this. And I am willing to testify." "What information?" "Ryan has done this before. Emily was not his first victim. There was a woman before her 15 years ago. Her name is Sarah Bennett. She had Ryan's baby, a daughter, and Margaret paid her to disappear." Diana felt her heartbeat quicken. "Keep talking." "Sarah signed a non-disclosure agreement. She took the money and moved to Seattle. But I found her contact information in Margaret's files. She has been watching from a distance all these years, waiting for someone to finally take the Mitchells down." Jessica pulled a folder from her bag and slid it across the table. "There is more. The original money that built Ryan's company, it did not come from Margaret's family fortune like everyone thinks. It was embezzled from his father's business partner, a man named William Crawford. Margaret helped cover it up 15 years ago. Crawford died never knowing what they did to him, but his family would very much like to know the truth." Diana opened the folder. Inside were financial records, legal documents, contact information for Sarah Bennett and the Crawford family, and detailed notes on every crime the Mitchells had committed over the past 2 decades. "This goes way beyond custody," Diana breathed. "This is fraud, conspiracy, possibly RICO violations." "I know," Jessica said, "and I am willing to help prove all of it. Whatever it takes to bring them down." Diana looked at this woman, this former enemy, who was now offering to become an ally. The irony was not lost on her. "Why are you doing this?" "Really?" Jessica was quiet for a moment. "Because my son deserves a better father than Ryan will ever be. Because Emily deserved better than what we did to her. And because I am tired of being afraid." She stood to leave, then paused. "Tell Emily something for me. Tell her I am sorry. It is not enough. It will never be enough. But I need her to know that I know what I did, and I am trying to make it right." She walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. Diana sat there for a long time, staring at the folder in her hands. Then she pulled out her phone and called Emily. "Em, you are not going to believe this." Emily listened to Diana's account of the meeting with a growing sense of unreality. Jessica Vale, the woman she had hated for months, the woman who had helped destroy her marriage, was now offering to help destroy Ryan. It felt like a trap. It felt too good to be true. But when Diana showed her the contents of the folder, when she saw Sarah Bennett's name and the financial records and the scope of the Mitchells' crimes, Emily understood that this was real. This was the weapon they had been waiting for. Diana presented the options clearly. "We can take this to the DA. Criminal charges, federal investigations. Ryan and Margaret could go to prison. But it means going public with everything. Your name in the papers. Hope's birth circumstances scrutinized. A long, brutal fight." Emily looked through the window of her hospital room toward the NICU where her daughter was growing stronger every day. Hope had been in the hospital for 2 weeks now. She was off the breathing tube. She was gaining weight. The doctor said she could go home soon. They tried to take everything from me, Emily said slowly. My home, my money, my dignity, my daughter. And they are still trying. Even now, with Hope in the hospital fighting for her life, they are trying to take her away. She turned to face Diana. If I do not stop them, they will do this to someone else. Jessica, Sarah Bennett, the next woman. They will never stop unless someone makes them stop. Diana nodded. I was hoping you would say that. Emily felt something settle inside her. A certainty, a resolve. Call Sarah Bennett. Call the Crawford family. Call whoever else you need to call. We are going to burn it all down. Building the case took 3 months. Hope came home from the hospital after 4 weeks, small but healthy, with her mother's brown eyes and her father's stubborn chin. Emily moved into a tiny apartment that Diana helped her find, funded by the assets that Ryan's lawyers could not freeze. It was not much. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, windows that looked out onto a brick wall. But it was hers. During the day, Emily cared for her daughter. At night, after Hope was asleep, she worked with Diana to build a case that would destroy the Mitchells. The coalition came together piece by piece. Diana handled the legal strategy, coordinating with prosecutors and filing motions to compel discovery. Jessica provided inside information, risking everything by copying documents and recording conversations. Sarah Bennett broke her 15-year silence, agreeing to testify about what had been done to her. She had a daughter too, Ryan's oldest child, a 13-year-old girl named Madison, who had grown up knowing her father was a wealthy man who wanted nothing to do with her. Rosa organized support from the Shelter Network, connecting Emily with other women who had survived wealthy abusers and could share their experiences. Luke provided practical help and occasional comic relief. His cooking had not improved, but he had learned to order from a better variety of restaurants. And there was Michael Brooks, an investigative journalist Diana had known for years. He had been trying to expose the Mitchell family for a decade, always running into walls of money and legal threats. Now, finally, he had the evidence he needed. The strategy was coordinated, attack from multiple directions simultaneously, financial exposure through forensic accountants who traced every hidden dollar, media pressure through Michael's investigative piece, which would drop the moment the legal proceedings began, legal assault through multiple civil and criminal motions filed in rapid succession, and witness testimony from Emily, Jessica, and Sarah, presenting a clear pattern of abuse spanning 2 decades. One November evening, the core group gathered at Luke's apartment for a final planning session before the storm broke. So let me get this straight, Rosa said, reviewing the plan while eating pizza. We have got the wife, the mistress, and the other wife all working together to take down the man who screwed them all over. This is like a Netflix documentary, but with better snacks. Luke laughed from the kitchen where he was attempting to make coffee. I tried to make something fancier, but Lily says my coffee tastes like burnt sadness. She is not wrong. Emily looked around the room at this unlikely family she had assembled. A year ago, she had been alone, terrified, convinced she would lose everything. Now she was surrounded by people who would fight for her, and she would fight for them. Whatever happens tomorrow, Emily said, I want you all to know how much this means to me. I could not have done any of this alone. That is the point, Diana replied. None of us should have to do it alone. That is how people like Ryan keep winning. They isolate their victims until there is nobody left to fight back. Well, Jessica said quietly, this time there is. Michael Brooks's article dropped on a Tuesday morning. Mitchell Development, a legacy of lies. Inside the real estate empire built on fraud, hidden children, and destroyed women. The story detailed everything. Ryan's pattern of affairs and abandoned families. Margaret's role as the family fixer, cleaning up scandals and destroying anyone who threatened their image. The embezzlement that had funded the company's original growth. The systematic harassment of women who refused to stay silent. By noon, the hashtag Mitchell Exposed was trending nationally. By evening, other women had started coming forward with their own stories. By the following morning, Mitchell Development's stock had dropped 30%, and the company's board of directors had called an emergency meeting. Ryan tried to fight back. He went on television to denounce the article as a hit piece orchestrated by his bitter ex-wife. He threatened lawsuits against Michael, against the publication, against Emily personally. But the evidence was overwhelming, and it was everywhere. Margaret made her own media appearance defending her son with ice-cold composure. Emily Carter is a disturbed woman who could not accept that her marriage failed. She has manipulated vulnerable women into lying about my family. Everything she has claimed is fabrication. The network called Diana that same evening. They want Emily's response. Live, tonight. Emily looked at Hope, sleeping peacefully in her crib. Her daughter was 5 months old now, healthy, happy, completely unaware that her mother was about to go to war on national television. I am ready, Emily said. She appeared on camera 2 hours later, wearing a simple blue dress and carrying a folder of documents. The interviewer, a veteran journalist named Catherine Wells, asked her to respond to Margaret's claims. Emily did not flinch. I was a kindergarten teacher when I met Ryan Mitchell. I gave up my career because he promised to take care of me. I trusted him. And when he was done with me, he and his mother tried to take everything. My home, my savings, my dignity, my daughter. She opened the folder and began laying documents on the table. Here are the financial records showing Ryan hid millions of dollars from the IRS and from me during our marriage. Here are transcripts of recorded phone calls between Ryan and Margaret, discussing how to break me. Here are the documents proving they fabricated a child abuse report against my brother to try to take away his daughter. Catherine Wells looked stunned. These are serious allegations. They are not allegations. They are facts, documented, verified, and I am not the only one. There are others. Women Ryan used and discarded over 2 decades. We are not going to be silent anymore. The interviewer asked the question everyone watching wanted answered. If you could say anything to Margaret Mitchell right now, what would it be? Emily looked directly into the camera. I would say what I wish someone had told me years ago. Money does not make you untouchable. Power does not make you right. And there will always be women like me who refuse to disappear quietly. We remember, we document, we fight, and eventually we win. The clip went viral within hours. By the next morning, it had been viewed 50 million times. The legal consequences followed swiftly. The district attorney's office opened a criminal investigation. Ryan and Margaret were charged with financial fraud, tax evasion, witness tampering, and conspiracy. Bail was set at $5 million each. Emily, Sarah Bennett, and Jessica filed a joint civil suit for damages. The Crawford family filed a separate suit for the embezzlement that had robbed their father. Other victims came forward, adding their claims to the mounting pile. Mitchell Development declared bankruptcy within 6 months. The criminal trial took place the following year. Emily testified for 2 days, calmly presenting everything she had been through. Sarah Bennett testified about the payoff and the NDA she had been coerced into signing. Jessica testified about what she had witnessed from inside Ryan's circle. Ryan's defense attorneys tried every trick in the book. They attacked the women's credibility. They claimed the evidence was fabricated. They argued that their clients were victims of a coordinated smear campaign. The jury did not buy any of it. Ryan Mitchell was convicted on 12 counts and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Margaret Mitchell was convicted on 9 counts and sentenced to 6 years. Their assets were seized. The penthouse Emily had once called home was sold at auction. The offshore accounts were emptied to pay fines and restitution. By the time the legal process was complete, the Mitchell empire had been reduced to nothing. Emily attended the sentencing hearing, not to gloat, just to be present, to remind Ryan and Margaret that she had survived, that she had won. Ryan saw her as he was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not remorse, not regret, fear. He finally understood what he had done and what it had cost him. Emily walked out of that courthouse into the spring sunshine and did not look back. 2 years after the trial, Emily stood on the back porch of her townhouse, watching Hope play in the small backyard. The townhouse was modest but comfortable. 3 bedrooms, a little garden, a neighborhood full of families. She had bought it with the money from the civil settlement, choosing something practical rather than flashy. She did not need a penthouse anymore. She did not need anything that reminded her of the life she had escaped. Hope was 2.5 years old now, a bundle of energy with her mother's brown eyes and an infectious laugh that could brighten the darkest room. She was chasing butterflies in the grass, her small legs pumping as she tried to catch creatures that were always just out of reach. Emily smiled, remembering what it felt like to chase possible things, to fight battles that seemed unwinnable, to keep hoping even when hope felt foolish. She had named her daughter perfectly. The back door opened and Diana stepped out, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. Sunday planning sessions had become a tradition over the past year, though these days they were planning expansion rather than survival. 3 new clients this week, Diana reported, settling into the chair beside Emily. All referrals from the article. And that foundation approved our grant application. Emily took the lemonade gratefully. How much? Enough to hire 2 more counselors and expand the legal aid program. We are going to be able to help a lot more women, Em. Hope's House had been Emily's idea, a nonprofit organization providing legal aid, job training, and temporary housing for women escaping abusive marriages. It had started small, just Emily and Diana and Rosa working out of a cramped office. But word had spread. Donations had come in. Women had found them from all over the country. In 2 years, they had helped over 500 women rebuild their lives. Rosa was the head counselor now, using everything she had learned from her own experience to guide others through the same journey. Keisha ran the job training program, helping women develop skills that would give them financial independence. Even Jessica had gotten involved by funding a scholarship program for children of domestic violence survivors. Sarah Bennett called last week, Diana continued. She and Madison are doing great. Madison got into a performing arts high school. Full scholarship. Emily nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Sarah's daughter had never known her biological father, and Sarah had decided to keep it that way. Madison was thriving without the Mitchell name or the Mitchell money. Some inheritances were better left unclaimed. What about Jessica? She is good. She and her son moved into that new apartment last month. She is starting a support group for women who were the other woman and did not realize what they were getting into. Emily smiled at the irony. 2 years ago, she had hated Jessica Vale with every fiber of her being. Now they were co-parenting half-siblings and building something meaningful together. Life had a strange way of working out. Hope came running over, clutching something in her small fist. Mama, flower! Emily took the dandelion her daughter offered, a scraggly yellow thing that was more weed than flower. It was perfect. Thank you, baby. It is beautiful. Hope beamed and ran off to find more treasures. Diana watched her go, smiling. She has no idea how much you went through to give her this life. Emily shook her head. Someday I will tell her, when she is old enough to understand. But right now, she does not need to know about any of that. She just needs to know she is loved. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching Hope explore the garden. Do you ever think about him? Diana asked quietly. Ryan. Emily considered the question. She had not seen Ryan since the trial. He was in federal prison in Pennsylvania serving his sentence. Margaret was in a women's facility in Connecticut. Neither had tried to contact her. Sometimes, Emily admitted, not with anger anymore. Mostly just with sadness. He had everything. Money, power, success. And he threw it all away because he could not stop taking from others. He will be in prison until Hope is 10 years old. He will miss her entire childhood. And for what? Diana nodded. I think about that too. All the damage he did, all the lives he ruined, and in the end, he lost everything anyway. Emily thought about the person she had been 3 years ago, the woman who fainted in that courthouse, convinced her life was over, who woke up in a hospital room with news that changed everything, who spent months fighting just to survive, just to keep her baby, just to prove she was worthy of existing. That woman felt like a stranger now. Or maybe not a stranger. Maybe that woman was still there, underneath everything, the foundation on which Emily had built her new life. You know what I learned? Emily said, watching Hope pick another dandelion. They can take your home, your money, your job. They can try to take your dignity and your hope, but they cannot take who you are. And when you finally stop being afraid of losing everything, that is when you realize you had the power all along. Diana squeezed her hand. Look at you, dropping wisdom like a motivational poster. Emily laughed. Shut up. I am being profound. You are being ridiculous. I love it. The late afternoon sun was warm on Emily's face. In the garden, Hope had discovered a ladybug and was watching it crawl across her hand with intense fascination. Diana was already checking her phone, moving on to the next item on her endless list of things to accomplish. This was her life now. Simple, full, meaningful, not perfect, never perfect, but good. Emily thought about all the women who would come through Hope's house this year. Women who were exactly where she had been, scared, alone, convinced that their situations were hopeless. She would tell them what Rosa had told her, all those months ago in the shelter. When the devil keeps coming for you, it is because you have got something he wants. Your life is worth fighting for. Your children are worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for. And she would tell them one more thing, something she wished someone had told her at the very beginning. You are not alone, not anymore. Hope ran back over, out of breath, cheeks flushed with happiness. Mama, Lily is here. Uncle Luke is burning things again. Emily looked up to see Luke's pickup truck, one pulling into the driveway. Lily, now 10 years old, jumped out before the truck fully stopped, already running toward the backyard. I brought dessert, Luke called out, holding up a slightly lopsided cake. I made it myself, only caught fire twice. The girls collided in a tangle of hugs and giggles, immediately running off to share whatever adventures awaited them. Luke joined Diana on the porch, accepting a glass of lemonade and settling into easy conversation. Emily watched her family, this unlikely collection of people who had come together through tragedy and stayed together through choice. Her brother, her best friend, her daughter, the community of survivors who had become her purpose. 3 years ago, she had woken up in a hospital room with news that changed everything. She had been pregnant, homeless, and completely alone. She had thought her life was over. She was wrong. Her life was just beginning. The sun was setting over the townhouse, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Hope was laughing at something Lily had said. Luke was describing his latest cooking disaster while Diana tried not to choke on her lemonade. Emily Carter took a deep breath of the cool evening air and smiled. This was what winning looked like. Not revenge, not fortune, not triumph over enemies. Just this. Peace, purpose, people who loved her. Hope. In the end, that was all she had ever needed. Emily Carter's organization, Hope's House, has helped over 500 women rebuild their lives after abusive marriages. Ryan Mitchell is currently serving 8 years in federal prison for fraud and tax evasion. He has never met his daughter. Margaret Mitchell's assets were seized. She now lives in a 1-bedroom apartment in New Jersey, released early for good behavior. Jessica Vale and her son live 3 blocks from Emily. The 2 women co-parent their children together and meet for coffee every Thursday. Sarah Bennett and her daughter Madison reconnected fully. Madison knows the truth about her biological father and wants nothing to do with him. Hope Mitchell Carter is a happy, healthy child who knows she is loved. Her mother intends to keep it that way. And that's Emily's story, a woman who walked into a courthouse ready to sign away her marriage and walked out with nothing but a baby growing inside her and enemies circling from every direction. But she didn't give up. She fought, she found her people, and she won. If Emily's journey touched your heart today, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button, not for me, for every woman out there fighting a battle nobody knows about. Let them know they're not alone. Drop a comment below. Tell me which part of this story hit you the hardest. Was it when her own mother blamed her? When they came for her baby in the hospital? Or when Jessica revealed the truth? I read every single comment, and I love hearing from you. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. You never know who might be going through their own storm right now. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. We bring you stories like this every single week. Stories about women who refuse to be broken. Stories that remind us all that hope is never lost. Thank you for staying with me until the end. You are the reason I do this. I'll see you in the next one.